Unglued by Lysa Terkeurst, Chapter 3. The Prisoners. The courtroom hushed as the judge prepared to read the sentence. All the hoping, praying, waiting, wishing we could change things, all the begging for mercy had led to this moment, the words on this paper, the sentence for my friend Christina. My heart drummed wildly as I stared ahead. All I could see was the back of her head, sitting atop a frame hunched painfully small. Christina stood, and the judge opened his mouth to speak. 3 years earlier, Christina and I had spent hours together, scouring discount stores for pictures and knickknacks with which to decorate my home. Making homes beautiful on a budget was Christina's art form. She was a master at spotting a treasure on a shelf full of broken, picked over, deeply discounted things. She somehow saw potential in these discards that completely eluded me. She could visualize rescued treasures as things of beauty when taken off the discount shelf and put on a different space. A shelf in my den, a corner in my kitchen, on my nightstand. Trust me, she'd say, "It will be beautiful. You'll see." Because that's what makes an artist, the ability to see beyond what is to what can be. Oh God, I said under my breath, please let Christina be able to do that now, to see beyond what is to what can be. Tears washed down my face as the judge told her she'd be going to prison. Prison. The word fell hard. Christina had 3 months to make arrangements for her family, and then life as she knew it would end for at least a year, maybe more. Christina had gotten caught up in real estate scheme she neither created nor fully understood, but she took full responsibility for her mistake and would now pay a steep price. Her freedom, the precious friend, a beautiful mother of 2 young kids, an artist with delightful tastes, was about to become a prison number. I walked away from that courtroom that day trying to think of words to comfort Christina. There was none. What she had done was wrong. I got that. She got that. And we all knew that there would be consequences. There should be consequences. But it still didn't stop my heart from feeling completely undone at the thought of Christina going to prison. A prisoner. This label states so much. As I didn't want that so much to forever define my friend. This woman who always saw beauty in the broken, discarded things of the world somehow see beauty hidden in her own life? Might I one day hear her say once again, "Trust me, it will be beautiful. You'll see." Could I see broken to beautiful for her even in this? Or would this be part of her life forever define her, label her as the woman who'd gone to prison? Labels. Labels are awful. They imprison us in categories that are hard to escape. I should know. While I've never been a numbered inmate in federal prison, I've put labels on myself that have certainly locked me into a hard place. Maybe you're familiar with labels too. I am angry. I am frustrated. I am a screamer. I am a stuffer. I am just like my mother. I am weak. I am a people pleaser. I am a jerk. I am insecure. I am unglued. And the list goes on. Well, I learned a powerful lesson about labels in a quite unexpected place, a children's book, which is just hilarious because, don't tell my kids, I am the queen of skipping pages in children's books and making up my own story. Tired mamas do things, so the fact that I actually read this one word for word is really amazing. Max Lucato's "You Are Special" is fantastic. Perhaps you've read it too. The main character, Puncello, is one of the Wemmicks, a small wooden people who spend their days sticking gray dots or gold stars on each other. Puncello struggled to deal with the negative labels, the ugly gray dots. That other Wemmicks have stuck to him. The aha moment in the story comes when someone tells Puncello, "The dots only stick if you let them." I know the story is for kids, but I must say these words were an empathy for me even as an adult. Labels only stick if I let them. That was the complete revolution. revelation, especially in connection with the labels I'd put on myself. Those labels start out as little threads of self-dissatisfaction, but ultimately weave together into a straitjacket of self-condemnation. When I thought about the ugly label Christina might carry with her throughout her life, I realized she wasn't the only prisoner in the courtroom that day. I was an inmate in a prison of my own design, locked behind the many labels I'd put on myself over the years. I redesigned myself to the lie that I would forever be enslaved to my emotions, and I spoke to myself in ways I'd never let another person speak to me. You're so blank. You're always blank. Things will never get better. You're just fill in the blank. I filled in all the blanks with self-condemning labels that tore me down. Take my struggle with organization. For months, my messy closet was a source of mental contention. Every day I walked in and out of this space thinking, ugh, why am I so disorganized? Why can't I have a closet like so-and-so? I don't think she ever struggles with keeping things tidy. I'm just a mess. I labeled myself a mess and then resigned myself to forever being a mess. I did the same thing with my family's tendency to run late. I hate to run late, and yet the realities of getting 5 kids anywhere on time is quite the challenge. But instead of raising to the challenge and putting perimeters in place to ensure on-time departures, I just felt defeated. I'm late, and I'm always going to be late. Why even try to be on time? I labeled myself as a late person and resigned myself to forever running late. Trapped inside these straitjacket struggles was a girl dying to break free from all of the self-defeating labels. Some prisons don't require bars to keep people locked inside. All it takes is their perception that they belong there. A soul who believes she can't leave doesn't. But what is a girl to do? We know we have issues, and labeling ourselves is what comes naturally to us. It's just what we do. How we act is how we label ourselves. We don't know any other way. I don't know any other way until I saw another way. The unfinished sculpture. Again, it was an unexpected place. Just as I don't often read children's books word for word, I don't often visit museums either. However, I'd read some fascinating facts about the David by Michelangelo and made it my mission to go and to see the original at the Accademia Gallery in Florence, Italy. A 2-hour wait in a long line of tourists gave me plenty of time to read the museum brochure about the David sculpture. To my surprise, I discovered that Michelangelo wasn't the artist who began the sculpture. In fact, he hadn't even been born when it was commissioned. The 19-foot block of marble had originally been the project of an artist named Agostino di Desio, but after sharpening some of the legs, feet, and torso, he abandoned the work. 10 years later, an artist named Antonio Rossellino was hired to complete it, but his contractor was subsequently canceled. It was nearly 25 years before Michelangelo, just 26, picked up a chisel and dared to believe he can complete a masterpiece. Sources say the artist never left his David. For more than 2 years, he worked on and slept beside the 6-ton slab of marble whose subject called to him from inside the unchiseled places. When at least the 7-foot David emerged, Michelangelo is reported to have said, "I saw an angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." When asked how he made his statue, Michelangelo is reported to have said, "It is easy. You just chip away at the stone that doesn't look like David. And now I was about to see it for myself." This sculpture finished. In 1504, that may have called an artistic miracle. I stopped just inside the narrow main corridor, still 30 feet from the David. This was not where anyone else wanted to stop, and so I caused a bit of a traffic jam. We had been waiting outside in the hot sun, and now that we were finally inside, everyone was on a mission. Indeed, I understood why everyone rushed past me. Why would anyone stop to stare at what captivated me? The much less impressive unfinished sculptures lining the hallway. Why attended the blocks of stone with roughly hewn, half-completed figures, when the sculpture perfection stands just a short walk away? Who would stop? Who would even care to notice? A woman captivated by seeing her interior reality vivid depicted in stone. That's who. I stood in the shadow of one of the unfinished sculptures. That's part of the collection aptly titled Prisoners. And I stared. I tilted my head and I let it soak in. I didn't want this experience to be a gentle breeze that passed through me and was quickly forgotten. I wanted it to be a rush of mighty wind, not enough to take me down, but enough to rip loose the labels wrapped so tightly around my soul. I felt it way down deep. The less noticed sculpture was me, an unfinished prisoner locked away in a hard place, labeled on prominent display in a hallway leading to greatness. Then I turned and looked down the corridor at the David, the statue finely chiseled by a master artist, and I was walked towards it. I whispered, "Oh God, chisel me. I don't want to be locked in my hard places forever. I want to be free. I want to be all that you have in mind for me to be." In that moment, I recognized a truth I'd needed to see for a long time. It is beautiful when a master chisels. God doesn't allow the unglued moments of our lives to happen so we'll label ourselves and stay stuck. He allows the unglued moments to make us aware of the chiseling that needs to be done. So instead of condemning myself with a statement like, "I'm such a mess," I could say, "Let God chisel. Let Him work on my hard places so I can leave the dark places of being stuck and come into the light of who He designed me to be." God is calling us out of darkness, out from those places we thought we would never get better, out of being stuck. Refuse the labels of the past. One of my favorite passages that confirms God calling us out of the darkness from 1 Peter. As you come to Him, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to Him, you also, like living stones, are being built into spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of the darkness into His wonderful light. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 through 5 and 9. These words were penned by the Apostle Peter. The name Peter means the rock, but Peter's given name was Simon, which means shifty. I can't escape the richness of the meaning here that Peter, the rock, didn't get stuck being shifty his whole life. He let God chisel. Remember, Peter was the one who dared to jump out of the boat and walk on water. Then he got afraid, started to sink, and cried out to the Lord to save him. In a manner of moments, he went from being bold to being scolded for his doubt. Matthew chapter 14, 22 through 32. Peter was also the man who loved his Lord with such passion that he drew his sword and cut off the ear of the guard trying to arrest Jesus in John 18, verse 10. Then just 7 short verses later, we find this same Peter denying he even knew Jesus. You are not the one of the disciples, are you? The grill at the door asked Peter. He replied, I am not, in John 18, verse 17. He sure sounds shifty to me, but not to Jesus. Jesus saw a courageous man who needed chiseling. Jesus saw a man who, when chiseled, would boldly do what others would not. Jesus saw Peter not as he was, but as he could be. Tenderly, Jesus chiseled. After Peter denied Jesus and Jesus was crucified and resurrected, Peter and Jesus had a conversation in which we get to see Jesus chiseling. 3 times Peter denied Jesus. 3 times Jesus asked if Peter loved him. I can almost hear the master's chisel clink and chip and smooth. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." That was in John 21, verse 15 through 17. Later in Acts, we see evidence of chiseled Peter. He's bold, assertive, prepared to do the work of the Master created him to do. Then Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice, and addressed the crowd. Fellow Jews, and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I say. With many other words he warned them, and he pleaded with them, "Save yourselves from this corrupt generation." Those who accept this message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. In Acts chapter 2, 14, verses 40 through 41. He doesn't sound like Shifty Simon to me anymore. He is Peter, chiseled Peter, whose bold preachings led 3,000 people to dictate their lives to Christ and be baptized in one day. The Apostle Paul is another man who refused the label of his past. Saul, the persecutor of Christians, became Paul, the writer of much of the New Testament. He wrote in his letter to the Ephesians, "For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." That's Ephesians chapter 2, 10. Paul was God's workmanship. Peter was God's workmanship. We are God's workmanship. God is chiseling us, making us new, releasing us from our hard places, those places that make us feel so stinking defeated, so we can do good works God has prepared for us, which means he knows how to prepare in us the character we need to fulfill our calling. Oh, that we might hear the purposeful clink of the Master's chisel and call it grace. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the great gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's workmanship, created in Jesus Christ to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 through 10. Is this true? Will I see grace and feel grace and call it grace when I come unglued? Even like Peter, I deny Christ with my actions, when like Paul, I have a past that's anything but godly. Will I embrace the grace by which I've been saved through faith? Choose to see myself as God's workmanship and do the good works I've been called to do. Are you ready to see yourself as God's workmanship and do the work you've been called to do? Let me share how I practically did this. Remember the messy closet that led me to define myself as a mess, and then when I defined myself as a mess, my emotions felt even messier. I was more short-tempered and off-kilter. As I untangled the root of what was making me feel this way, I did 3 things. Number 1, I identified the label as a lie meant to tear me down. The reality, my closet was messy. The lie, a messy closet means I'm a mess. The truth, a messy closet does not make me a mess. It makes me a child of God who has a messy closet. Grace, I can see it, I can feel it, and I can call it grace. Number 2, I chose to view this circumstance as a call to action, not a call to beat myself up mentally. A messy closet means I need to hit the pause button on life one day and clean it. And if I can't figure out how to clean it, then I need to find someone gifted in this area to help me. And that's exactly what I did. My friend Lysa has the spiritual gift of closet organization. Is there such a thing? I saved up my pennies and paid her to come and share some of that Jesus equipping with me. Grace, I can see it, I can feel it, and I call it grace. Number 3, I use the momentum of tackling one label to help me tackle more. The taking action and tearing down this one label in my life has given me the courage to tackle another label. Oh, the courage and strength found and starting somewhere. Might you find a small label to tackle today? Might you? Grace, and you will see it. You will feel it. You will call it grace. Christiana came to understand the power of grace in prison. After being incarcerated several months, Christiana wrote, Lysa, I am doing really well. I am so hungry for God's word, and God is really using me to pray and to share the gospel with other women in here. The absolute terror I felt about coming to prison has been surrendered to God, and in place of that old fear is strength, peace, hope for the future. God revealed why I had come here. He's led me to repent for things I hadn't even realized held me in bondage for so many years. Grace. A woman goes to prison and finds freedom from her real bondage. My mind went back to the hush of the courtroom that day, to the confronting words I wanted to say but couldn't find, to my tears and questions and fear that Christina would forever be labeled as a prisoner. Now I see God's workmanship even in this hard chiseling Christina is experiencing. Christina made the choice that put her in prison, but it was God who freed her in the midst of that place. Let God chisel. Trust me, God says, it will be beautiful. You'll see. Grace, she sees it, she feels it, and now even in prison she calls it grace. I'm not a poem girl, but every now and then I stumble across one that captures the essence of what God has been teaching me. My friend Jania saw the following in her daily devotional, Streams in the Desert, and knew she had to send it my way. In the still air the music lies unheard. In the rough marble, beauty hides unseen. To make the music and the beauty needs the master's touch, the sculptor's chisel keen. Great master, touch us with your skillful hands. Let not the music that is in us die. Great sculptor, hew and polish us, nor let, hidden and lost, your form within us lie. Indeed, master, touch us with your sculptor's chisel keen. And with that, we continue our journey towards imperfect progress. I don't know what labels you've been struggling with or struggling through, but friend, let's unglue them. It's that sense I rather like the thought of being an unglued woman.